All right. It is September 12th. I've got Dave and Bill for Gridiron 360. Good morning, Bill. How you doing today?
Good morning, my friend. What's happening? And Mike, we forgot because we don't really typically get these up the same day, but hats off. Never forget the men and women that served our country yesterday in 9/11. I do want to make big note of that. We all have our stories. I grew up in the Northeast. You all know I'm a New York Giants fan. I had family up there when it happened, and it's a day we'll never forget. So prayers go out, and God bless America, my friend. God bless America.
Yeah, let me echo those as somebody that's been to both the sites in Pennsylvania and also the one in the downtown Manhattan area. It moves your soul to see what happens, and you know what? It sickens me to not see people fly the red, white, and blue with pride because there's still a lot of great Americans, and people did some amazing things and in the face of horrible danger. So, yes, I echo those sentiments exactly.
Nice. So, let's get in. We were talking about the NFL today and previewing week 2. And as you heard Dave leading us off, I'm going to let him take the helm most of the day, and I'll play along.
I got to admit, I'm giddy like a schoolgirl.
Awesome. Here we
Giddy like a schoolgirl.
Here we go again.
And looking down, and not to change gears, but to change gears, and looking down the college slate this week, it's, there'll certainly be something of interest, I'm sure, as there always is, but the slate's a little weaker. But looking at the NFL, I'm giddy like a schoolgirl.
A lot of games, a lot of divisional matchups this week. So, could be fun.
Could be. In fact, it will be. We know that. If there's one thing we know, the only thing that's sad is it'll feel like tomorrow when I'm talking about the Super Bowl, and that's the only thing that bugs me.
I know, but that's what we're here for, is in that off season to keep it going.
Absolutely.
For all you diehards, we'll keep it going in the off season. And it'd make it feel like it never left, even though that's going to be very hard to do because we'll be feeling that too. But we're going to do our best.
Absolutely. So today is Thursday. We're going to get this up quickly because we got a game coming out for us tonight.
Divisional matchup.
Absolutely. We've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going to face the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
This game, just to give you a little idea what our buddies out west are thinking in Vegas, we got a 6.5 points given to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road and 49 for the over-under. So that's kind of what Vegas thinks of this game, and more to the point what the betting lines are and what people that are actually putting the cash down think about where we're going.
Cash.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of high expectations for the Buccaneers this year. Didn't see a lot of amazing play out of them. Panthers took on a tough opponent in the Rams. That was at home, too, correct? Or no, was that
in Carolina?
That was in Carolina, so they're getting back-to-back home games.
Yep.
And we're unable to get it done, so we're going to kind of discuss how we project these teams going forward. So give me your thoughts on what you think. You can start Bucs or Panthers. I give you free reign, my friend.
All right. Well, I think a lot of people, we talked about Jameis Winston being in the last year of his contract, and we know he's a guy that, will throw his picks. But the expectation, I think, for a lot of folks going into the season were that he was you'd see the ball slinging around, certainly. Tampa Bay would be behind in a lot of games, is the thought. And he would throw his picks, but he'd also have yards, touchdowns, and so forth. He was on the opposite end of that last week. Looked horrible through, 1 touchdown, 3 picks. So I think the running game for Tampa Bay, even though they have announced that Peyton Barber is still the starting back, We discussed briefly in the recap from last week, Ronald Jones seemed to be more productive. I think that's what they drafted him for. So if that doesn't eventually change in terms of the starting position here soon, then I think it will. But, a lot determines on how these guys continue to perform. So that said, I think you look at what Gurley did last week, though he didn't have a ton of carries, and we talked about why we think they're really trying to save him for the end of the season.
Yeah, warm him up, all that.
He had a productive day on the ground, very efficient in terms of the workload. I think he had somewhere around 16, 17 carries, and he went for 95 yards. So just
14 for 97.
14 for 97, even more efficient. So I think that could play into this whole game. A 49 over under, I don't know, man. I think I talked about it in the recap. I think we might want to hesitate a little bit with the Thursday night game. Short week. I think it's going to be personally a lower scoring game, that it won't get to the 49 over under, that'll stay under. I think it'll be a field goal kicker type game in my mind. Christian McCaffrey on the Panthers side will do his. He always will. The Bucs going to have to throw everything at stopping him. But other than that, I think Greg Olsen, I'm not sure he'll play. He's banged up.
He's questionable.
He's questionable. It's a short week. Don't anticipate that'll be out there. And if he is, I don't know how effective he'll be outside of maybe blocking. From a receiver standpoint, you really don't know on the Panthers side. Typically, it's been what we've seen in the past couple of years is Curtis Samuel is usually the more productive guy, but with Funchess gone and DJ Moore kind of taking over that quote-unquote number one receiver role for the Panthers, he actually outperformed Curtis Samuel last week. It wasn't great. It wasn't anything, high-flying, but so at the end of the day, I think that the 6.5 being given is a little misleading. I think it's a divisional matchup, man, and I know what you saw last week. It doesn't mean it could change at the drop of a hat. So I also think that they're not going to hit that. I think it's a divisional matchup. I think that Tampa will find a way to keep it close. I think that Winston will have a better day. At the end of the day, I think the Panthers are going to win the game. They did lose last week just barely against the defending NFC champs, and it was back and forth. So I think they need to chalk up a win on the board. I do think that the Panthers, not as good as the Saints, but definitely looking like a solid number 2 in the NFC South. And the Saints could take home field advantage and be the number 1 team in the NFC at the end of the year all around. So, but that's not to say that the Panthers can't squeeze in with a wild card, because I think they could end up with a good record as well. So this game is going to be important for them to take. It's a game they should win. I don't know. What do you think? I'm thinking on under. I don't think they'll cover, and I think that the Panthers will win, but I do think it'll be more of a field goal type game. What about you?
Yeah, well, here's what I expect to see as far as game plan goes. And I think, to me, the 6.5 is more indicative of the idea in my mind that Vegas thinks that Jameis Winston's going to be a turnover fest, if I'm just being honest with you. I think that's where they get those points from. Now, here's what I expect. One, I think Winston is going to have to play this team from behind. I think the Panthers are going to follow a similar game plan early on with the Christian McCaffrey, shorter routes, try to get a lead on them and force the Buccaneers into passing, which I think anybody would do, just given Winston, propensity to turn the ball over. The question to me will be this. I think what the Panthers, and I mentioned this about looking at them last week, what they need to do is they need to figure out something on the outside.
Right.
Where this game could get out of hand is I expect them to try to unload a few times, particularly as they get into the second quarter and beyond, to see if, Cam Newton can start to get a rhythm with the deep ball. I mean, that's certainly a part of his game where sometimes he hits and sometimes he doesn't, but when you get him in rhythm, I mean, we've seen Cam Newton be a fantasy monster in years past, but injuries have kind of derailed that for him, and him getting hit in the backfield. I don't see the Buccaneers being able to bring that to him. So I expect to see some deep shots to see if they can find somebody on the outside that can get it done, because this would be a team to do it against. If so, that would be how I would envision the game going, where they cover the over. I'm a little bit more, just because I just didn't see it out of Carolina last week, I'm a little bit more inclined to lean the way you're talking about. I do think the Panthers win this game. If they have, this could get out of hand in my mind if, and this is a big if we see Winston turning the ball over and we see Cam be able to hit some deep balls in this game, because the more you open up the mid-range, the short to intermediate routes for the Panthers, the scarier that offense becomes, just because you got Christian McCaffrey. On an Olsen note, again, Olsen, it's all about, he can catch the ball, but it's all about, can he stay healthy? He did practice yesterday, which is a good sign. He's still listed as questionable. That's certainly that's more of a safety valve for him when someone actually covers McCaffrey, which is pretty daunting. Yeah. So, again, I look for the Panthers to win the game. I would say there's probably a 60% shot that it is what you say, and a 40% shot that the Panthers be able to overrun it in this game. I would lean more, again, with those percentages, I'm leaning more towards them, it being a little bit closer of a game. But I just want to throw that nugget out there that this would be the game where you could open up Cam Newton a little bit and test out and see if this guy can sling it with his shoulder, and if his receivers can get open down the field.
Sure. You kind of touched on, you think he might get a few downfield. Who do you think is going to benefit from that on the wide receiver side for Carolina?
I mean, initial thoughts would be probably the obvious of like a Curtis Samuel having a big game out there. But it's going to be, to me, they just haven't really shown it to me yet for me to feel comfortable that it's going to be one particular guy. And again, I said this, they struggled to push the ball downfield against the Rams. Now you're talking about much better cornerbacks for the Rams than you're talking about for the Buccaneers. So
they've got Hargraves, and I can't even remember who the other guy is.
Yeah. So I just, again, and then the other part is, if Winston's turning the ball over, it could limit his ability to throw downfield, because depending upon where he turns the ball over, they may end up with some short fields in this game. I don't know. I think you could see this is, you got to realize you got a brand new coach here in Bruce Arians. I always say this. The worst place to be is to be a known entity quarterback with question marks and a new coach, because Bruce Arians is going to be married to whichever quarterback he goes to next year. So the question is, and Winston's in his make or break year. If he's not married to him, then, and he's not, he doesn't have to be, he doesn't have to hang his career on it. Now, if you draft a guy like Winston, or any quarterback for that matter, then you got to ride him. Like, I'll give you an example of a marriage that's completely tied together is going to be Kyler Murray and Kingsbury.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, especially given what they did. So I always look at that, because you see it in a lot of coaches.
Well, I mean, keep in mind, like, even, I get it. I mean, the onus right now is on Winston, as it should be, because, he's in his contract year. Because if Tampa Bay, doesn't do well this year, which kind of looks like it, especially in their division, they have to play all those other teams 2 times in the NFC South, and they'll be lucky, I think, to squeak out 1 or 2 wins amongst that.
Yep.
But if that's the case, I mean, as opposed to last year where there was a question of the quarterback crop coming out, I don't think there's going to be that much question. I mean, if they get close to somewhere at the top, even if they're not 1, 2, or 3, but somewhere close where they might be able to give up a little and move up to get in that slot. And let's keep in mind, over the past few years, a lot of teams that have been in need of a quarterback have went out and drafted it and are still in that growth period, that infancy stage, that newlywed stage, even beyond the infancy stage. So they're probably not targeting a quarterback in the draft next year. There are some guys coming out, as we know and as we've discussed. You got Justin Herbert from Oregon. You got Tua coming out. What's that other? You got Jalen Hurts that could come out.
Sure.
I mean, there's guys out there this year in the quarterback.
And then there'll always be that one guy that you didn't know at the
Gardner
beginning of
Minshew.
the year.
I mean, we knew about him, but you didn't know that would translate. He's kind of one-hit wonder in college. So, I mean, I do think the onus is on Winston. He better get his act together, or otherwise, they will move on, I think, very quickly at the end of the year from him.
Yeah, and a way to do that without losing your team. I was looking it up here because I didn't even know who Tampa's backup is. I didn't even think about that, but it looks, if I got it correct, it looks like it's Ryan Griffin. Does that sound right to you? But anyway, a way
Ryan
to
Griffin.
Why don't you check that for me?
will.
But my point of this is that, like, you don't want to have a scenario like the Miami Dolphins. There is mistrust in that locker room. Now, I'm not saying I believe in the whole, like, hey, half the team went in and turned in their jersey and said, trade me. But the idea is when you go out there and you...
Blaine
Gabbert? Oh, Jesus.
Blaine Gabbert.
But you can go in and play that backup quarterback and say, you know what? At some point in the season, Winston's not my guy, and still play to win, knowing that you've lowered your odds of winning in order to kind of sustain that draft choice but not lose the team. Blaine Gabbert would not be that guy necessarily. That probably wouldn't look.
I'm surprised he's still in the league, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, you look around the backup. So anyway, I think these are teams. One team that's trying to recapture the magic and needs to do it quickly, because if Cam Newton doesn't kind of get back a little bit, I don't expect him to get back to an MVP type season, but if he doesn't get back and they're not competitive this year, you got a team where you go, man, what are we going to do? You got a young running back, you got an aging defense, and you kind of start asking questions about, like, did the window start to close? And where you've got the Buccaneers knowing that to some form or another, you'd like to keep winning as much as you can, but while rebuilding. I mean, they're clearly in a rebuild mode. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Again, I think this is Carolina. The question will be if they have the only way this, in my mind, becomes a rout is if they are able to hit their deep shots, but more importantly, if, Tampa starts turning the ball over.
Right. I am curious. McCaffrey last week had 19 carries for 128 yards and 2 TDs and another 10 receptions for 81 yards. So in total, he had just under 30 touches in the game. I'm curious, especially because that was the Rams. This is the Bucs. He can do it. We talked about how he always looks fresh still. The NFL is a long season, just like we talked with Gurley. I wonder if they try to come off the gas a little bit with him.
Well, this would be the game.
Yeah, and not run him crazy. Here's a name for you that in doing the show prep, I really didn't even realize that he was on the Panthers. That when you talk about deep balls, and he saw nothing last week in terms of targets. He might have had a target, but he had nothing, no stat.
Enlighten me.
Mr. Chris Hogan. From the New England Patriots is number 15 on the Carolina Panthers. So, he's a guy that pretty much his role in that New England offense was the deep ball.
Yep.
You didn't really, they had Gronk and Edelman for the underneath routes. He was the deep ball guy. Yep. So I wonder if he gets a little bit involved. I don't know. Should be interesting, but Thursday night football, we'll see how it plays out. And I'm excited. 8:20 tonight on NFL Network. How am I going to watch that? Is it on NBC too, I guess?
I think it's streams maybe.
I might be going to Dave's tonight. All right. Well, let's jump in.
All right.
We're going to, just like we did last week, we're going to cover the Thursday night game and the early slate of games on Sunday. And then we'll get it up, and we'll right behind it get the Sunday afternoon games and the Sunday night, Monday night games on a separate cut. So take us through 1 o'clock games.
All right, we're going to start with your boys. It's a New York battle. The Bills, after coming back against the Jets, so they actually, I imagine they might have just stayed, even though the flight's short. And they're going to play the Giants again at MetLife. The line on this, the Bills are giving 1.5 to the Giants, and the over-under on this is 44. So I know you're a lot maybe down on the Giants. That's a thin line. It does show that they believe the Bills are the favorite without a home field advantage, getting a 1.5 here. I gotta admit, I'm a little probably against Vegas on this one. I guess what I see here is, it's a little bit more of an up-and-coming team with the Bills. I am feeling good about their defense. I feel like they took a step forward. I think they're going to get better as the season goes on. And the Giants obviously are struggling just with the sense that their offense, they're not playing their young gun quarterback, which I think is the smart move. Eli Manning, there's been concerns there for a couple years now about his ability to push the ball downfield and his arm strength. But I got to tell you, there's something that's gnawing at me with this. And, they have Sterling Shepard down. You got Saquon Barkley. Okay. I don't think that the Bills were not as effective as I would have liked to see them on the ground. Singletary was very good, but he only had 4 touches. Josh Allen's going to do his thing and get some yards. But what I like is that this Giants team can chip away down low. I mean, you got to remember, they were going up against one of the best defenses in the NFL in Dallas, and the offense was off the chain in that game for Dallas. They put together a complete game. While they scored a touchdown late, they still put up some points. I don't know. I'm feeling like the Giants might get one here, and their ability to kind of dink and dunk, but at the same time, you got Evan Ingram over the middle. Saquon against a very good defense, got his yards. It changes the complexion of the game, and they won't be forced to throw quite as much as they were in the last game. This is a game I think the Giants have a chance to win. I like the things that Josh Allen does. I believe that they'll clean some things up. I just think the Giants matchup here might be to their favor. What say you, sir?
Well, I am, it's my team, but I am down on them. But there's definitely a chance. I mean, look, you look at the schedule this year. This is one of those games at home. It's early in the year that, if we're going to win some games, and believe me, I don't think we're going to have a great season. I mean, I'll be happy if we get to 500, but I don't even know how that's going to happen. 8 games, I think, with this roster is going to be a little tough. My biggest concern is my guy that I'm always talking about, Josh Allen, because he truly is dual threat, and it's not like Lamar Jackson dual threat. He'll run the ball. He's fast, but he's not shifty. He'll just run you over. And he can sling the ball too. We saw with John Brown last week, and that's a big concern of mine. I do like DeAndre Baker that we moved up at the end of the out of the beginning of the second round to get into the end of the first round to take him, the corner out of Georgia. I think that he is going to eventually be really solid, but he's still young. And granted, last week I saw him; he got burned a little bit, but he was giving effort. However, Janoris Jackrabbit Jenkins, he's not the same dude. He's lost a step. And we have a bevy of guys over there in the secondary that are they're not NFL starters, man. And they're getting picked on because offenses know it. And I'm afraid that the connection that John Ross and Josh Allen had last week, you'll see them try to exploit that again. And I would think they'll try to do it early. With the mishmash of the backfield, I think they'll try to establish or get out early and then try to establish the run. That said, I think it is a good chance for the Giants to win. It's going to be tough, but I think that Saquon certainly will get on track. Le'Veon Bell had 60 yards on 17 carries, but they didn't really run the ball a lot. Sam Darnold threw the ball 41 times last week, so it was definitely.
And that's with the team up 16-0.
Yeah. So look, we're not talking. Le'Veon is a great back, but Saquon at this point is so much better. And I think he'll get his, and he'll. Last week he was solid, but I don't think we're gonna have to play from as much of a deficit as last week. So I think it'll be a little bit of a back and forth game. I do think that the over under is pretty on point. I would even maybe go slightly under. I do think the defense for the Bills is better than our defense by far, but I just think we'll find ways, and hopefully our D coordinator, Dave Betcher, will draw something up that can get some pressure. Because as we said in the recap from week one, the problem I saw is that, we're great in the middle of our defensive line, but we got no edge rusher. And it's causing us not to have any pressure or set edges. And when they know we're pretty good up the middle, so just run the ball outside because there's no one there to set the edge or get pressure.
I look at it as two teams with, kind of the way I'm going with it is there's two teams with imbalanced offenses. They clearly have gaps in their offenses. And so I look and I go, okay, you got a Bills defense that's good. Potentially could be better than good. I'm not going to put them in elite. Certainly, I just don't believe that. And then I look at, you've got a game monster in Saquon Barkley who is ultra elite. So I just think Saquon wins this battle. I think he changes the tempo of the game. I think I watched Dallas try to control him, and they did an okay job controlling him, and he still got off. So I look for him to get in the end zone a couple of times. I think the Giants win it.
All right. Well,
so are you going Bills or are you going Giants? I want an official. I'm going to put you on the spot, pal.
I've said it already, and I just don't think it's there yet because, you got Sterling that most likely won't play. So, you're pretty much elevating Cody Latimer to that number one receiver, and then you got like Benny Fowler that'll come in behind. But, they're going to strap their who's their number one corner? Is it Darby? Is Darby on their team still?
Who are we talking about, for Buffalo?
For Buffalo.
No. Darby's on Philadelphia.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. He was, though.
Yeah, he was. They lost him.
I'm trying to remember who their number one is. The point is this. I think Cody Latimer is great as a number 2 or number 3, but he's going to have to see the number 1 corner on him because he's going to be the number 1 receiver, and I don't know how that's going to work out. I do think that Saquon, as I said, and to your point, is going to do his thing. I think at the end of the day that the Bills are going to win the game and cover the 1.5.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move on from that game, and we are going to head a little bit south and see the Jaguars take on the Texans. Jaguars get two really tough offensive matchups in a row between Kansas City and then the Texans.
Yeah, that's a bad draw right there.
This is -9 with an over-under of 43. Remember, the Jaguars have lost their starting quarterback, and Minshew came in and I thought played respectable in that game. The Texans come off a tough loss to New Orleans, where it was not an offensive issue, but there were definitely some defensive hiccups. But again, going against a superb offensive team led by one of the all-time greats in Drew Brees. So tell me what you're thinking in this game.
The over-under is what, 43, right? So I think that you'll see this go over. I think this is going to, be a game where I think Gardner Minshew is going to sling it around. I think what the Jaguars need to do is have Fournette rolling so that they can, just like last week, keep the other offense that's potent off the field. But I think, DeAndre Hopkins and Jalen Ramsey are going to get after it. But Jalen had a tough time against Sammy Watkins last week. And I've said it before, DeAndre's uncoverable. I do think that he'll have a good game. I wouldn't be surprised to see Will Fuller have maybe a couple touchdowns to where Nuke may have one. The backfield for the Texans was surprisingly efficient and did what they had to do. But I think they're going to go over on this thing. I think that The Jaguars behind Minshew offensively will be able to try to keep pace, but eventually I think it'll slip. I don't know about a 9. A 9 is a lot, even though they are at home. So I wouldn't say that the Texans are going to cover the 9, but I do think this will go over, and I think Houston will win it. I think Deshaun, they're a good team. They lost by the skin of their teeth, and we talked about that division in the AFC South, and it could be up for grabs despite losing last week. And that's, I think, one of the narratives that we said it was up for grabs because they're 0-1 in the division, and, the Titans won. And it's like of the division, the team we didn't expect is kind of doing the best. It's only 1 week. I think the Texans are still the top of that division at the end of the day, and this is a game they need to get right. If they're going to get back to winning that division at the end of the year, they have to win this game. It's a divisional opponent. They're at home, first home game of the year, and they need to win. My concern is, and we talked about it, is J.J. Watt. They need more pressure. They have an edge guy in J.J. Watt, though he's aging. So he needs to get back there and cause problems for this rookie. This is, he's not going against the Rams, or I'm sorry, the Saints and Drew Brees. He's going against a rookie, and he needs to make it troublesome for him. And quite frankly, the defensive coordinator for the Texans needs to make it trouble for a rookie. So I do think the Texans will pull it out. I think it'll be closer than expected. I do not think that the Texans will win by 9, but I do think it'll go over just because, we saw in the second half that Minshew he's no fear guy. So I think he's going to get the ball up in the air. They're going to have to, and you might see a little bit of a, matching each other as the game starts, and then eventually I think you'll see the Texans pull away with this thing.
Yeah, this game's got, to me, a lot of subplots to it. I think, God, if I could find a must-win in week 2, it's going to be for the Jaguars. If you look 2 years ago when Blake Bortles had probably his best year as a pro and this team went and played in the AFC title game, they did well and their defense was very strong, a little bit of an up-and-coming defense. And now you've got a team that went last year when Bortles was, Blake Bortles, and the defense was forced to carry the load. They broke. The team lost its mojo. Now, obviously, they get in a situation with Foles, and while I liked what Minshew did, the Texans' defense is significantly better than Kansas City's defense. I look for them to just close up the run and make this kid throw deep.
Is it, though? Is it significantly better?
I think Kansas City's defense is bottom third of the league. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying the Texans are a top tier defense, but I think they're at least probably 10 slots better than Kansas City in the NFL. Wow. So, but here's the thing is, the Jags got to win this because the fear is knowing that your quarterback's going to be out for a long, long time, if not the season. If the defense doesn't take this game over, then you could be looking at that spiral that they had last year. So I think there is a lot of desperation in there. So one of two things can happen. Either this team can cave in on itself, and, given that the Texans offense is so explosive, I think they're going to be very aggressive against the running game. The Texans didn't run as much as you would want them to do with the issues that they had, but they ran well. You saw Hyde and Duke Johnson run for good clips. Yeah. So, are they going to want to shut that down? This is a game, though, I will say this. I talk a lot about it, and I hate it because it's not what I want to see with a guy as gifted as Deshaun Watson. This is a game that scares the hell out of me for his health, because the Jaguars could come after him and exploit some of these things just to try to knock him out of the game. Again, you see it when the game's on the line. If that guy's upright, he can burn you bad. And so I just, it's one of those games where if that was to happen, God forbid, it would definitely change the complexion of the game. I think 9 is a little high too as well. I think there is going to be a little bit of pride in this defense. And I think, unlike last week where they thought, hey, man, we could come into this game and we might be able to offensively compete with them if we play a decent level of defense. Obviously, that changed right after that touchdown pass where Foles got hurt. I think now they know, we're going to have to win a lot of games with defense. And so their level of focus. So this is kind of a make or break game for them, and then going 0-2 in a division that is winnable at this point. It's going to be a tough division, but it's winnable. Given the fact that the Texans have some gaps, and then you got the Colts. But those are two teams. I expect you're going to have a good record to win this division in my mind. So, and then the Tennessee Titans obviously had a pretty good game last week. So I'm going to go with the Texans. I think it's going to be a little bit closer, but I do think this has the ability to get lopsided depending upon what happens. Obviously, if Deshaun Watson goes down, that would be horrific. But on the Jacksonville side, if they're not focused, Deshaun Watson could just punish them all day long. And so, I'm going to expect a close game. I'm going to hope for no injuries. And I would love to see Minshew, get going in that game. But to me, it's the Texans.
Yeah, I mean, look, the other thing that kind of concerns me a little bit, and it plays into what you just said with Deshaun staying healthy. He was the one that was on his back more than any other quarterback last season, and they were supposed to fix those problems, and they made an effort to. Granted, in the first game, I do think, Tunsil's a young tackle. I think he's very talented. I think he was just not completely ingrained into what was going on with the Texans offense because he just got there. So hopefully it's a little better this week, but they've got to protect him, man. He went down 6 times last week. I understand he got hit running and moving around, but just, if he's going to still do that, he is, and he's got to maybe come off the gas a little bit in the way he does it, or at least learn to get down, get out of bounds, take a hit better. But what in my mind needs to be cleaned up more is the hits in the backfield, is him getting sacked. Yep. They can't have him get sacked, 4, 5, 6 times a game. I understand you get sacked a couple of times a game, fine. But, when you're doubling that number up every game, that's the problem, okay? Yep. It was one thing if he's running the ball and gets hit, but it's his choice, his moves. It's him making a decision. When you got somebody, a DN coming off the backside and you don't see it and just cleans your clock, that's where I think Deshaun will get hurt. So, and they've got players on their defense. We know that. So he needs to stay upright. And vice versa. I think that's the way that the Jaguars can put themselves in a position to potentially win a game like this, is to get back there in the backfield because they know that line might not be where it needs to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think one guy to keep an eye on in this game, because I expect I think the Texans know they have a problem with protecting him to some degree. I expect him to be willing to leave the pocket a little bit more, but he's got to be smart and get down, which is not his MO.
He goes for the gusto.
Yeah, and you've got a guy who was very, very close to getting suspended, and it was debatable last week with Miles Jack. He had an incident with Sammy Watkins and then was getting all in the ref's face, and he was lucky to avoid that suspension. But that's a kid that can smack you in the mouth if you get out open. I think they'll spy a little bit, just to make sure that they, it's pick your poison with Deshaun Watson. I think you're better off making him throw, and that's not a good option in and of itself. But I think that's to pick your poison, because if he starts running and is getting first downs on you, then the game can get out of hand. But I think it's going to be interesting. I think you're going to define the Jags season with this game, because if it does get out of hand, I could see this team falling into the toilet fast, because they lost their heads last year defensively. And so you got some volatile personalities out there. All right. So what we'll do is we're going to move on to the next game here, which is going to be the 49ers and the Bengals. At this point, you're looking at the Bengals giving 2 points to the Niners with an over-under of 45. So what say you 49ers Bengals?
I thought that we talked about it in the recap. It was very surprising in the Seattle game that Cincinnati travels out there to Seattle, which is a tough place to play, and though they lost the game, they gave them a game, and I didn't think it was there. I know the 49ers aren't great, and it is the Bengals home. I'm just not sure that what we saw from Cincinnati last week is what we can expect the whole year. Maybe fresh legs, high expectations. I'm expecting that at some point in the year, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to look at least somewhat like what they picked
Like
him
$100
up
million quarterback?
and paid him for, quite frankly. And I think this is the game that it can happen.
Okay.
I think that in terms of an over-under, I think it's 45 is what you said. I don't know if we'll have that many points. I don't think that we have great defenses. I just think that I don't know that we have two offense that are that high-powered that they're going to put that many points on the board. I do think the line of the Bengals giving the 49ers 2 tells you something for sure. I do think it's going to be a close game. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna play a little contrarian on this thing. I think that with Joe Mixon being out, they'll be fine to run the ball with Gio, but I think that I think the 49ers are going to come with some pressure this week. They do have a few dudes on that defensive line, and I think they're going to try to make it hard for Big Red and Andy Dalton to really have time in that pocket and see his receivers. I don't think you're going to see the explosion that you saw John Ross have last week. I think Tyler Boyd will probably be more effective and will be the go-to guy, more of a dink and dunk type passing game. And from the offensive side of the ball with the 49ers, I mean, you saw it last week, and I don't think it'll change. Kittle is his favorite guy, and I do think that's going to cause trouble for the linebackers and safeties for Cincinnati. And I think that essentially could win them the game. Now, just like the lead back for Cincinnati's down, same for San Francisco, Tevin Coleman's down, but Matt Breida steps in, and he too is pretty solid, as you saw at the end of middle to end of last year. Not phenomenal, but solid. So I don't really think there'll be a ton of a drop off there because Coleman didn't really show much last week before he got hurt. The receiving core for San Francisco is, you got a couple of young guys in Pettis who should be, we didn't see it last week, but last year, downfield threat. You got Deebo Samuel from college at South Carolina. He's a deep ball threat. Marquise Goodwin, I don't know what's going on there. So, again, we go back to Kittle, who I think will have a good day. But I think somewhere in there eventually the Bengals, after getting eaten alive so much by Kittle, might start to focus on him. And that may leave somebody like a Pettis or Deebo Samuel open to hit a big play at some point in the game. And again, I'm going to go contrarian on this thing. I'm going to say the 49ers actually win the game and that the thing's going to stay under. I don't think there's going to be 20 points on both sides, 20 plus points from both teams to make that happen. And that's roughly with that 2 over under what you're talking about. I mean, that spread of 2, what you're talking about. So, to be honest with you, not a super exciting game that I'm looking forward to. Gonna, make sure I catch some of it so I know what happens. And but I think the game script is going to be, with the lead backs out, it's going to be the quarterbacks leading them rather than the running game. It's going to be, pass first, maybe 60-70% of the game on both sides of the ball for that matter. Now, you might think that would play into a higher scoring game. I just think that when you get into the red zone, unless you're hitting the big play, then more than likely you're going to have to score inside the red zone. And we all know when you're in the red zone, the field is compressed. There's less area to work with, and it makes it harder to get on the board. So you end up with more field goals a lot of the time.
Yep.
So, but I do think this is a game where Garoppolo can actually show his value in the money that they paid him. And quite frankly, I expect to see it and hope to see it.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. I had, going into this season, the 49ers arrow pointing upward. I would say more of an arrow facing east-northeast as opposed to due north. And the Bengals, obviously, I think a lot of people had that arrow pointing down. I got to say, of all the wins I saw last week, the 49ers were the least impressive to me. I was not impressed with that. And the Bengals were the most impressive team I saw from a losing effort, just given, this team didn't not only beat what is expected to be a contender for the playoffs and maybe more in Seattle, but did it in Seattle. All right. And that was really impressive me. So I think the arrows have kind of turned on these teams. I will go with not only could Garoppolo have a big game, I would go so far as to say Garoppolo has to have an excellent game. Remember,
well, keep in mind the 49ers played the Bucs last week.
Right.
Oh, I thought you said Seattle.
Oh, no. I was talking about Cincinnati playing Seattle. I was just talking about the variations of the two arrows.
Yep.
Sorry, I got to make sure I state my teams. But know something, the 49ers lost Tevin Coleman in this game, as Bill mentioned. So we're gonna see last year's running back who came in, and Matt Breida and Breida. So and what you also had though was their other running back, what's his name? Mostert. Thank you, Mostert. Yeah, come in and he played pretty well. Here's the whole thing is the Niners threw only one receiver caught more than one ball for the Niners last week. Okay, you had Samuel get 3 receptions for 17 yards. Not one other receiver on the roster caught more than one ball. And that is a big problem. And I put a lot of that on Garoppolo, that he's got to be able to do that. His stat line was very unimpressive. They got a lot of short fields, so I can somewhat understand the yards, but I expect that guy to put it home. And, one of the things I'll say is, just going through this Niners defense, and while they did get 3 turnovers in the game, I'm expecting a heck of a lot more from their fronts. Their front 7 should be a lot stronger. We're talking about Eric Armstead, first rounder.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about Nick Bosa. What was he, number 2?
Yeah.
Not Nick Bosa. DeForest Buckner, top 10 first round pick. That's in your front. Then you got.
Is Solomon still there? The kid from Stanford that took 2 years ago or 2-3 years ago that hasn't shown up.
That's very telling if we're asking that question. So you got that kind of front. You've got. They went out in free agency, got Quan Alexander in the middle linebacker. They got D Ford. I just found it all very uninspiring.
It's
what
like
I
I
saw
said.
out there.
Like I said,
you got an aging Richard Sherman who did get a pick, so I got to give him that.
Was it a pick 6?
I believe so. Yeah, it was a pick 6.
It's like I said, there's some talent in the front on San Francisco, and I think they're going to try to make it hard for Dalton.
I think they're set up. They clearly have issues at wide receiver, but this is what you paid Garoppolo for. Go out there and make it happen. So, yeah, I would lean Niners on this one. But, again, momentum is going in the opposite direction for both of these teams after week 1. I'm going to take the Niners. I'm going to take the under. I'm even struggling to cover 2. That's how off I am on the Niners.
Okay.
So
you think it could be a 1-1? It could be that close, huh?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, you're right. It's the Bengals given to. I just think it's gonna be the Niners, but it's a squeaker. So yeah, I guess they'll cover because they're getting the points. But this game is it's one. I will keep an eye to, but until I see this Niners defense play up to their draft status. And until I see Garoppolo consistent, it wouldn't shock me to see the Bengals take this game.
Yeah. All right. Well, it sounds like we're both a little on that one. So let's pop along to the next game, which I actually do have a lot of interest in. And that will be the Arizona Cardinals are traveling to Baltimore, taking on the Ravens. The over-under on this thing's a 46. The Ravens are giving a hefty 13.5 to the Cardinals. If you recall last week, the Cardinals, we had talked about in the recap, really were asleep the entire game till the end of the third, and then all of a sudden the light switch went on, and that air raid offense did what we expect. Will that continue, or will they start the game sputtering? We'll have to see. But end of the day, it went to overtime, and it was a tie game. We hate ties, but they don't have a loss on the resume under first-year head coach Cliff Kingsbury and their first pick in Kyler Murray. So I guess it's, again, they don't have a loss. Ravens did win and look good at doing it. They destroyed the other team.
Mm-hmm.
13.5 is a lot, Dave. And I know that the offense for Baltimore was high-powered. That 13.5 is indicative of they're at home with that defense, and this young air raid offense is going to struggle. That's what I see from the line. I don't know. What do you think before I kind of make a projection? Let me hear what you think.
I
let's
think
see
this.
If we can talk about it.
The Cardinals' comeback was less to me about the Cardinals and more about how bad the Lions were. I mean, this is a 180 of defenses. I think the Ravens get out early. I think this is going to be a Mark Ingram. It's going to be a running show. I do. I don't think they're going to need to do it. I think the Cardinals, if they're smart, will try to protect over the top, but in doing so, I think are going to open up big holes on this defense. I'm going to go kind of weird on this one. This is more of a feeling. So if you're going to Vegas, I don't want any Facebook comments back to me that I cost you money. I think the Ravens are going to cover 13.5, but I don't think we're going to hit the over.
Whoa. So you're talking a big deficit probably then. You're talking about them winning probably, last week, not to the point where they, put that many points on the board, but in terms of deficit, with the 13.5, they're covering into 46. That's
yeah. I mean,
interesting.
And where I kind of get that from is, the Lions were up 17-3 at halftime, and then the Lions collapsed in the fourth quarter. And so I guess my point is I don't see them collapsing, but I also don't see the Ravens. I may be wrong. They may just want to continue to unleash his arm. I don't think they have to. This is not a prove-it game. I'd be more interested in getting to 2-0 than I would be trying to prove that the quarterback can consistently throw the ball deep. He had a perfect quarterback rating, in this game. Like, just if you look at the best quarterbacks, it's hard to duplicate that. Do I think he's going to have a bad rating? No. I think he's going to do well in this game. I just don't think there's going to be the need, and I think that just they can establish the run on this team and hurt them. But the Cardinals are bad enough defensively for him to do something like he did last week. I just don't see the need for it, and I just think they're going to run a little earlier, and I think Mark Ingram could control this game.
Interesting. I do think Baltimore is going to win the game. I understand the 13.5 points, but I understand it based on recency bias for what Baltimore did last week. I think that the Cardinals' defense certainly is nothing phenomenal. I'm trying to look up here to see if they're going to get Pat Peterson back this week because he was out last week. I think he will be back this week. I think Baltimore is going to win, but I don't think they're going to cover. I think that you'll see, if not right out the gate, that air raid offense at some point come to life, and I think they could score quickly. And I don't necessarily think it might be a very close game. It might be a touchdown. It may be 9 points, but 13.5 is a lot. And I do think that the speed and the firepower of Arizona's offense can potentially keep it closer than a 13.5 line. But that being said, if it's going to happen that way, I think they're going to have to, try to trade blow for blow as much as they can with Baltimore.
And Peterson, let me just say, Peterson is out because I didn't think it was an injury. He's got a 6-game suspension.
Oh, it's a suspension. It is 6 games. Okay, well, it's still, I still think that, they're going to the Ravens will do. Hollywood Brown's great. I don't think you're going to see what you saw out of him last week. Right. He might have a good day, but I could completely agree with you in that Mark Ingram's going to be the guy to carry the weight for the Ravens this week. I do think Baltimore will win the game, like I said, but I think that the Cardinals will cover the 13.5. But I do think it'll be a little bit higher scoring, which is not something I guess in the past you'd expect from two teams like this in past years. But times have changed. Really, the entire image of their offense and what they do has changed, and I think it'll go over. I think it'll be a higher scoring game. I think what'll happen is that the Ravens will probably get up by more than a score on them at some point in the first half, and the Cardinals will try to eke back in, cut it back to one score. The Ravens will get it back to another 2 score. And it doesn't have to be 2 touchdowns. It could just be 9 points, 10 points. But then I think that's kind of how it'll proceed throughout the game. And Arizona will just run out of steam and not be able to catch them. But if I were to tell you at the beginning of the year, this is a game that was something I have, some serious interest in. I'd probably scoff at it after week 1. And again, we do overreact. And I don't be surprised to see things come back down to earth a little bit. But I do think that this is something I have some interest in just because there's some dynamic players involved.
Certainly. Yep. Yeah. So we are both on the Ravens, but on the opposite sides of Vegas on this one. Yep. So we're going to move on to the next game, which features a team that the Cardinals played last week. We got the Chargers heading to Detroit to take on the Lions. Interestingly, the Chargers are giving 2.5 points. Seems a little light to me. And the over-under is 47.5. So what say you on this one?
You said it, man. I'm not sure about this Detroit team. Is it the curse of the ex-Patriot assistants that they're just not, they can't get it done as head coach? They didn't look good. And honestly, I expected more from a guy like Matt Patricia than a lot of those assistants that have come out of New England. Maybe not right out the gate, but eventually you'd see them start to build towards something. And I actually think it's going in the other direction since he got there, yep. And that's sad to say. Stafford, despite what you may say, he didn't do too bad last week. But you're talking about they played. Who did they play last week? The Chargers.
Played the Colts.
Oh, they played the Colts. That's right. And the Colts have a solid defense, but I don't think they have a front with edge rushers like the Chargers do. So I think that, if anything, will call. And Brissett is younger, more mobile than a Stafford. That's going to cause problems. I definitely think that, with Hunter Henry, we got the news yesterday that he went down. I think I texted you. I thought it might have been season ending with a tibia. And then more news came out, and it sounds like it's a knee. And right now they were saying maybe 4 to 6 weeks. He might come back. I don't know. It's unfortunate. This kid is very talented. Great college career at Arkansas. A lot of expectations from him. Look, for the Giants, love Evan Ingram. Same caliber of tight end. Jordan Reed for the Redskins, same caliber of tight end. And you've seen what happens with the injuries in his career with Reed. We're hoping Evan Ingram stays healthy this year because they're going to need him in New York. But he's had injury-plagued seasons since he came in a couple years ago. And here we go, 2 years in a row, and Hunter Henry's hurt. And that concerns me. But that said, they still have weapons. And this is a game where Mike Williams, I think, will get right because a lot of people were expecting him to get right.
Yeah, keep an eye on his health. That's still been a concern.
It's a little bit of a concern, but he'll be. Lynn came out and said that they're not concerned about him playing this week. He's a tough kid, man. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll get a touchdown this week. you said it before in the recap in our fantasy cast because you have Keenan Allen. Guy's still Keenan Allen, man, and he's going to eat. I think Austin Eckler is going to have another great day on this day, and I don't know that the running game in Detroit's going to get going the way they want it to. I think they're going to have to, they're going to have to lean on Golladay this game, I think. This is a game where Golladay may need to, show up and pretty much do everything for him, and just maybe off to the wings, Marvin Jones not doing great, but some solid things, picking up some first downs for him and stuff because they're going to be all over Golladay. So I think 47.5 actually. I'm going to go Chargers. I'm definitely going them covering the 2.5. I do think 47.5 might be a little large because I think the Chargers are going to beat them pretty soundly. And I think they're going to get up early on them and try to control the ball and not have to fire it downfield. I mean, Rivers can do that, but you know as well as I do, he's the intermediate underneath type passing guy. Unless they have to catch up in a game, he's not going to sail a bunch of balls deep downfield. That's just not really who he is. Yep. He's a quick release, snap the ball, zip through the reads, quick release, and get the ball out of your hands and get into the playmaker's hands. So I guess Chargers covering the 2.5, staying under on the 47.5. I'm excited to see the players on the Chargers side of the ball. I'll be honest, I'll probably be a little dumbfounded if I'm not correct in this. If Detroit makes this a game, and if even we expected more at Kerryon Johnson, if he shows up to form the way they said, I'm actually going to be surprised. Because last week told me a little bit of something, and it wasn't something that was good.
Yeah, I mean, my head tells me, the Chargers are definitely a better team than 2.5 against the Lions. But this is a game where I kind of want to ask that question: what does Vegas know? One of the common things.
Scary.
Yeah.
Scary.
Now,
Vegas is scary.
That being said, there is a lot of track record about West Coast teams going to the Eastern time zone and playing a 1:00 game, about them not performing as well. I'm going to take the Chargers and the points, given the points. They're going to cover. And I am going to go over because I just feel like there's something with this Lions matchup that I don't know. I think I'm being swayed by Vegas, and I hate being swayed by Vegas. But I just am, just because,
Who do you see what do you see out of the Lions that could, if you're saying over, they're going to be rolling too. They're going to try to be
Well, let me put it to you this way. I don't see the Lions holding the Chargers to a low point score, and I'm getting kind of swayed by the fact that the line is so close. Which
so
leads
you
me
think it's going to be a destruction?
No. I don't.
The Lions last week, how many points did they have against a not great Arizona defense?
Not
here,
many.
I got right here. It was 27-27, but that was the overtime score. So essentially,
and they both kicked field goals.
Yeah.
Right?
So it was 7. They scored a touchdown after just to try to match Arizona after they come out and put 21 points out in the second half, because they only had 3 in the first. So, Detroit came out through 17 up in one corner, which is a lot quick, but I don't know. I
don't think they're going to blow the doors off the line. There's something that is gnawing at me. So my point is, but I also don't see the Chargers coming in and scoring like 17 points in this game. I see the Chargers scoring in the mid to high 20s in this game, and if you match that up with the Lions, I mean that's pretty close to the over under. I'm going to go a little bit over. I'll admit, I'm not strong on this pick. That's kind of what I see. The reality is if the Chargers are scoring, the Lions' best part of their offense, and it has been historically, because they will refuse to commit to the run. They cannot find that, solid back that's going to carry. they're going to go to the air. And that is if you keep Matt Stafford upright. I mean, Matt Stafford is kind of that guy. He used to be the guy that would put up 3 touchdowns a game every game, and then Lions would lose because they can't play defense. He doesn't do it as frequently as he does, but he still has the ability to have a big offensive game. Again, it's a Chargers team. I mean, it's going to be 9 o'clock in the morning for them, or 10 o'clock in the morning playing that game. That stuff does mess with teams. Hopefully the Lions have a little bit of attitude in this. It wouldn't shock me for the Lions the score to be lower, but I just think in this game that's what I'm going to project. I think there's something there in this Vegas line that tells me that it's going to be close to that line, but I'm going to go over. It's a guess. I will admit it's not my strongest feeling in the world.
Yeah. Here's one thing to look out for. I think from the Detroit side of the ball. If in my mind, if Kerryon Johnson doesn't show up the way they expect him to today, because last week it was 16 carries for Kerryon, 11 for C.J. Anderson. Production-wise, they were pretty much close in terms of the yardage they picked up or their average. But if Kerryon doesn't do his thing today, I believe he's going to quicker and quicker start to lose grip on that starting role. And
True.
that it become more of a mixed backfield. If anything, it could eventually go the other way.
True.
So, I mean, if they go to a true running back by committee on this thing, but CJ continues to outperform in that scenario, the roles may get reversed as we hit middle of the season or right before middle of the season. So that's something to watch out for. I didn't think Kerryon ran well last week. Again, it's against the Cardinals defense that I don't think there's anything formidable to be afraid of on. And they were not getting it done on the ground. It took Stafford to get it done through the air to keep them in that game.
Yeah, but to keep in mind, last week, and again, I think there's a much better back in with the Colts, but this Chargers offense gave up 203 yards on the ground. That's big in the NFL. They did a little better through the air. So, 25 carries for 174 yards. 174 yards is big for even good running backs to get.
Marlon Mack had a day on him.
So I don't know. I think maybe they're seeing some holes in this with this Chargers team. So again, we'll see what would happen there.
All right.
So let's go ahead and move on. Again, we're kind of, I guess, tapping on the previous game. The Chargers' opponent, the Colts, will be traveling to the Tennessee Titans. Titans -3 with a 44.5 over-under.
Yeah, you
so
begin.
That is an interesting one to me. I could see this a little bit more as a slugfest. I'm going to, I guess just right off the gate, I'm going to go under on this one. And because I don't think Frank Reich will put Brissett in the situation where he has to throw the ball as much as the craziness they did with Baker Mayfield. So I don't think we're going to see the turnovers. I think the Titans are going to see longer fields than they saw in the previous game, which means they're going to have to show consistent offense. These are two teams that showed that they can move the ball on the ground. So I think that kind of chews up the clock a little bit more. And I got to admit, I'm a little kind of back and forth on this one, but I think I am going to go. I think I'm going to take I'm struggling with this one. I really am. I think I'm going to take the Colts on this. It's not, again, this is another one that's tough. I liked what I saw to the Colts. I liked that they could run. I like the Titans. I'm looking at the two QBs and I'm thinking they're going to have longer fields in this game, I believe, because I believe both defenses will play well. Which quarterback can sustain drives longer? That's kind of what I think this is going to come down to. And it's tough because you got Brissett, who has not been a long-time starter, and you got Mariota, who's had a lot of games in his career. I just don't think it's going to be a turnover fest in this that created kind of what happened last week. I think the Colts will be a lot more committed to the run, as I said. I'm gonna take the Colts in this game.
Okay. I think that keep in mind last week, as good as the Chargers did against the Colts, I'm sorry, as good as Austin Eckler did against the Colts. He did only have 58 yards on the ground. He only had 12 carries. He also did really well catching the ball. So, you look over to the Titans side and, Derrick Henry, he had a great day last week.
Yep.
Okay. The guy went 19 for 84 yards and a TD. But I lay that out for you I think that the Colts defense is better than a lot of people think. And I think that their run defense is the best part of their defense. So I know Henry had a good game, but we've seen it before where he's done nothing. I mean, Henry's good when he gets like that head of steam and gets going. He is a big guy and he'll run you over. But if you can stop him before that head of steam, which is where I think the front for Indianapolis is probably at their best of the defense, it's going to be a problem. So in that vein, then I think it'll be more on Mariota's plate. We know that Delaney Walker as tight end is his favorite dude, and you'll see him get used a lot in this game, I'm sure. I think A.J. Brown may come into the fold. I think Adam Humphries may come into the fold. But those are guys that I don't see a lot of deep stuff necessarily to these guys. I think it'll be a bit of a back and forth, man. I think it'll be a bit of a back and forth. I think it'll be a little bit of the same on Indy's side of the ball. I don't think you're going to see a lot of big pass plays in this game.
Yep.
I think it's going to be, Mac had a good day. Let's run Mac. Tennessee, they've got a good defense as well. I mean, they held that quote unquote Cleveland Browns high-powered offense everyone's expecting to 13 points last week, okay? But Chubb did get 75 yards on 17 carries. He didn't see the ball nearly as much, I said it in the recap, as I think he should have. So I think there is room to run. Mac had a great day last week, and I think that they're going to continue to try to, play that card and see if it is what they think with him. And in the same token, I think T.Y. will do his thing again too, because and not from a deep ball perspective, which he can get, but I think it's going to be the slot underneath routes and him having the yak after he grabs the ball. So I do think it's a little bit of a back and forth. I actually agree with you. I think Indianapolis is going to take this one, and so therefore there will be no cover by the Titans. But I'm going over. I think it's going to be back and forth on this thing. I could see both teams somewhere in the mid 20s points wise. I think it'll be a little bit of back and forth. Again, this is of the AFC South. You got the Texans and the Jaguars going to war. Now you got the other two teams in the division going to war, in the Colts and the Titans. So it's an important game. Don't get it twisted. And the Colts, despite whatever expectations people may have for them, don't think that any team in the NFL doesn't go in with aspirations to get to the Super Bowl. That's the ultimate goal. And they can't start out 0-2 and one of those losses being in the division. So
yeah, something, just an interesting note here that I was looking at, and it's, you got to kind of take it with with some context. But the four leading tacklers for Tennessee against Cleveland, Logan Ryan, the cornerback, was number one with 7 tackles. Strong safety, Kenny Vaccaro had 7. And then Adoree Jackson, the cornerback, had 5. So you've got 3 of your top 4 tacklers in the secondary. Now, granted, Cleveland threw the ball a lot and wasn't committed to run, but something additionally interesting was Logan Ryan had 1.5 sacks, which means they were sending pressure from the outside. Now, flip that over to the Colts, and the Colts have one of the better offensive lines in football, and running the ball, well, that ability to run blitz packages from the outside kind of gets offset. So you can see how that game plan is probably not going to be viable against this team if they commit to the run, which I expect them to do.
Good point.
So when you kind of see that, and, Logan Ryan had an interception this game too as well. So he was blitzing. So they were confusing coverages. What I look for this is to be a little bit more, and I think you and I both pointed it out, a little bit more of a vanilla type game plan. And I think that favors the Colts in this, like, significantly. And
Sure.
like you said, so if it comes down to the Lions winning on both sides of the ball, you're talking about the Colts.
Yep.
So that's
Yeah,
just
their
an interesting
offensive line
tidbit.
is still a very good line, man, and it showed last week with Mac going off.
Yep.
So, okay, good. Well, next game on the slate, another divisional matchup in the NFC East.
Yep.
The Dallas Cowboys traveling to our nation's capital to take on the Washington Redskins. The Cowboys are giving the Skins 5, and it's a 46.5 over-under. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I've got things to say, but I'm going to let you say your piece.
Okay, so I guess I'll just get the pick out of the way. I think the Cowboys take it. I do think they cover. I think we're going to hit the over, but it's going to be close, and I think what it's going to have to do with is Washington scoring a little later in the game and some of that slower time. I think the fact that we kind of saw a little bit about what Washington's opportunity is, and that's to come out throwing. I think the Cowboys are going to be a little bit more ready for that than the Eagles were in that game. But again, you saw once Philadelphia kind of woke up, they started to dominate that game. I think, Dallas is certainly going to be a little bit more committed to the run in this game. It is in Washington, so that's part of it, and you can get into the divisional game. It's going to take another exceptional performance from Case Keenum to keep this game close, in my mind. Obviously they're going to have issues at running back, so they got to solve that. How is the balance between Adrian Peterson, how's he going to look, and Chris Thompson going to look? I could see this game, being maybe like 31-17, barely pushing over the line,
Right.
with maybe a late touchdown by Washington. I just think Dallas has too many horses. I don't know that they'll necessarily have the offensive explosion against the Giants that they had, but I think they'll be probably more efficient, maybe not quite as big of as much as the big chunk plays they got in the passing game. That's kind of what I see. There's a challenge now because you got Josh Norman out there, and he doesn't always have the best games in the world. He's got a little bit more of a name than productivity says, at least in my mind. But who are you going to cover now? You know what I mean? We saw them spread the ball between the three receivers very well. So likely he's going to be on Amari Cooper. And what does that say for Randall Cobb and Gallup? Again, I see him trying to control with the run a little bit more and maybe take that next step with Zeke in this game. And that's kind of where I see it. I see it being close to that over-under. I think they're going to go over with a Washington score at the end, and I think the Cowboys will cover.
Okay. I think that it's going to be a game that, Zeke is definitely going to start to see his share of the workload, and that workload that he kind of split a little bit with Pollard last week will taper off. He's now ingrained. I think they'll come out early and feed him, and I could see the first drive, them marching down the field, feeding Zeke and him scoring.
Yep.
I definitely think that Dallas is going to come out ready to play. I do think Washington is surprising with what they did last week to the Eagles early, and I wouldn't discount that. Then they are at home. I think we could have another big day from this McLaurin kid, the rookie receiver out there. I think that people need to temper the expectations, especially if you're looking from a fantasy standpoint with Adrian Peterson. I think he'll be fine while Geis is out to play in a flex spot, maybe a running back 2 spot, depending on how deep your fantasy league is from an NFL perspective. I think he'll be fine and solid as things progress. Again, while Geis is out, I think this game, though, just temper your expectations. Chris Thompson, I think they're going to have to play catch up, and that plays into Chris Thompson's favor. I think that the front for Dallas in terms of their run stopping, they held Saquon in check, and that's hard to do. Saquon still had a decent day, but they held him in check, and, he's way better than anything put together that Washington's got in the backfield. So it's going to be on Keenum's shoulders. I will take Dallas to win this game, but I think, and I always say this, I think that it's a divisional. It's a divisional opponent, dude. Divisional opponent, dude.
Mm-hmm.
I think 6.5 is, or I'm sorry, 5 is still a lot. I think that the Redskins, and it might be right at the end, that just kind of to the narrative you were talking about, that they do it, but I think they'll stay in this game at the end to the point where that they're going to stay within that 5. So I don't think that Dallas will cover the spread, but they will win. But I think it'll go over. Again, I think Dallas will get out early, and I think that the Redskins will try to match them. And I wouldn't be surprised at one point if the Redskins take the lead like they did against the Eagles last week. I just don't know that they can finish.
Yep. Okay.
So now we're moving at a good clip. If we're going on to the next one, let's go.
All right, so we've got the New England Patriots heading down to Miami, take on the Dolphins, and it's college football time because there's an 18.5-point spread on this game.
Oh, wow.
And only a 48 over-under. Only a 48.
So obviously, yeah, that tells you something that the Dolphins are. But I think I heard something. That's one of the highest NFL, if not the highest NFL over/under for a road team or spread for a road team.
Yep.
Given points.
That is equivalent on a neutral site to more than 3 touchdown over/under. That's pretty impressive. So I guess I'm going to go with this. I told you, everybody, when I recapped, I went with Pittsburgh over New England, and I told you my reasons why. It wasn't a lot of logic put in it. It was just my belief that was the game that was going to piss off the Patriots on their way to a Super Bowl run. As I mentioned, they're already pissed off. There is a feeling, or I guess some past history with two things. That teams don't play well in Miami. Road teams don't play well in Miami in September. The weather and everything else. And that, in particular, the Patriots do not play well against the Dolphins.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two things that have the drawback. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I say it's all Patriots roll. I watched the Dolphins quit. And the Patriots are monsters. I don't care whether that other receiver who will remain nameless plays or not. They're equipped to manhandle this. I could be wrong. Those two factors could come into play. I'm just not going to get fooled by the Patriots again. I'm going to say they cover. Not so sure about the over/under on this because they might dominate Miami's offense that bad.
And just go to the ground?
Yeah, I mean, the Patriots aren't known, like, they don't have to prove anything. Like, if you looked at the one thing I'll say is the Ravens were trying to prove that to not just to the world, but to Lamar Jackson that he could throw the ball deep. So they kept attacking that. Patriots have nothing to prove. They can score, they could win 24-3 and completely dominate this game. I don't think I could see this one being very much like Pittsburgh, but they're the type of team that's like, you know what, we've done it already, and they can just say we're going to run the ball, run the clock, because what does Belichick have to prove? So I could see him covering and not hitting the over. Mm-hmm. They don't need to put up 59 points, I guess is my point, and still have everybody go, oh my God, who is going to give them a shot this year?
Yeah. It's a bit disheartening what happened with Miami there last week. That's embarrassing. You said it. This is a college football line. Well, that was a college football score. And I think that you're exactly on point with the fact that teams sometimes have trouble despite how good Miami is going to play there, and especially divisional teams and especially New England. And to that point, there's just a weird feeling inside of me that says Miami's going to have a little bit of a bounce back game. Are they going to win this game? Absolutely not. The Patriots will win this game, but 18.5 is a ton, and I could see what you said, the Patriots jumping out and controlling the game and going to the ground, but for that fact, I think that's going to keep it a lower scoring game. I think it's going to stay under the 48 because I don't know. I think the Patriots can score all of it if they wanted to,
Yeah.
because I don't know where it's going to come from on the other side of the ball with Miami. But I think that they're going to try to they'll find a way to keep it close. And again, if the Patriots will probably get out, and then they'll probably try to slow the game down and eat clock. Belichick is, you said it, he likes to screw with fantasy football owners.
Yep.
I mean, I could totally see them going from last week, which was like this aerial attack, to a ground attack.
Yep.
I think that people were very disappointed in Sony Michel's performance from a fantasy perspective, and from an NFL perspective, you're like, well, the Patriots never take backs in the first round, and they did that with him last year. And all along, I said they did that because they had a reason for taking him. They wanted, knowing that Brady's aging. I think this is the game where that narrative plays out. The thought process going into the year from both an NFL and a fantasy perspective is that Sony is going to help ease the aging Tom Brady by, them ground and pounding the thing. I think this is a game you'll see that. I do think AB will play. And I think with the addition of him, that not necessarily he'll be involved in the game, but I think Josh Gordon is going to maybe not have a ton of grabs, but he's going to have, like he did last week, like 4 receptions for over 100 yards. It'll be deep balls. I wouldn't be surprised if he scores. I don't know who's going to be able to cover him on the back end of the Dolphins, and I think their only hope is going to be to try to bring pressure on Tom and devote everything to the front, because I don't think they got anything on the backside. So I think at the end of the day that, like I said, I think the Patriots will definitely win this game, but I don't think they're going to cover. I still think that's a big line, and I do think it's going to stay under. I think it's very similar to what you said, but I'm saying they're not going to cover from the sense that, they're going to get out, they're going to slow it down. Miami may chip away and get back. 18.5 is a lot, and it doesn't take much to stay within that realm, and for the Patriots still to be totally comfortable with the lead they have.
All right, so you heard it here first. What Bill is saying is that the Dolphins are better than the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because they covered the line they would have covered this line.
Well, here's the other thing. I play in another league that's a pick'em league. We have to bet on the lines. We get to pick 6 games of the week, and one of them is our best bet. And for years and years, even the Patriots have had big lines, maybe not like this, but they've had double-digit lines on people, and still we've gone New England because they always seem to cover it. At the end of last year, there were a few games that they didn't. That was surprising. They might not even been such steep lines. This is a ridiculous line. I know that Miami looked like trash and New England looked unstoppable, but it is the NFL, man. Everybody, there are dudes out there. Everybody's good. The worst player on the Dolphins was a star in college. So,
okay, but understand something. I said that last week against the Ravens, and I watched a team get throttled and quit.
And I think
that shocked me. And I mentioned that I just thought they would just give them something.
Hey, look, they got the new coach in there, and it's going to be very important for him and his job and moving forward that he changes, that he flips the script from last week.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not saying you need to go in this thinking you're going to win the game, even though they do need to think they're going to win the game. I'm not saying that's the case, but you have to go in this thing thinking you have a shot. You have to not allow what happened last week against the Ravens to happen against the Patriots, who, I know that Baltimore looked great. New England looked unstoppable last week. Yep. So, but that's irrelevant in my mind. You're talking about, for these guys, for the team, for the owners, for the fans. I mean, they need to change something and change it fast.
Yep.
Again, it doesn't need to be a win, but if they lose and New England covers even the spread by 19, that's not good.
Yep.
Not good.
I agree.
don't believe in the tanking for the season this early. I don't.
Oh no, I don't believe in the tanking. I just saw players quit. I don't think they're quitting because the ownership or the coaching staff or the management said let's quit. We'll give you this one update. I don't think you and I believe that Antonio Brown has any bearing on how well this team does. Meaning, we believe that New England
they can do it
without him.
Man.
But just at this point, again, I hate the TMZ side of football. But where we stand with the Antonio Brown situation, which just bears some watching more from a fantasy perspective, there was an allegation in a federal court on a civil charge of rape against him. There's 2 statements out that are very much contradictory to each other, one from the accuser, one from Antonio Brown. The question will become, does the NFL put him on an exempt list, which is not a suspension, but just being that they're investigating this, because it is a very serious charge, whether true or not. And at this point, the only other thing that we've seen is the Pennsylvania district attorney has clarified that there is no criminal investigation against him right now. That's where we stand. All I really care about, I've never got into the personal lives of athletes, other than the ones that we talk about on the Mount Rushmores, the Larry Fitzgeralds, the Drew Breeses, the J.J. Watts, and I'm not going to get off that train now. I'm going to stay away from it, but just an update for everybody on where it stands as we speak right now. Not really even sure. There's no indication whether he is going to play or not. He is practicing.
Yeah, I would. This may be the only game that you see him play, and then. Maybe he'll come back later on after the dust settles. It does sound a little bit like a money grab, but hey, AB's not right, man. He's got wires crossed upstairs. I don't know. This is a clear case of a guy that wasn't highly touted out of college, that had earned everything he had gotten, but unfortunately the money and the fame went to his head, and he ain't right, man. He's not right. So Belichick won't put up with that shit. They're gonna pump the brakes for a second, but don't think for one iota that Belichick doesn't have his finger on the red button to say peace, because if the slightest thing, we said at the beginning of we're talking about this game, they don't need him.
Yeah, I mean, again, we'll let it play out, but I would say, given that it happened so close to the signing and the due diligence that the Patriots do, question could be, did they already know about this, which they very well might have. So again, we'll let it play out. I think this team, the important part, because we're going to talk football, is I don't think this team needs him. Is he another dynamic? Yeah, but they don't need him. They're dominant without him. So regardless of what happens, it would not sway how I feel about this game.
Sure.
So we're going to move on to the next game and talking about the Patriots' dominance. We're going to take the team that got dominated. The Steelers are hosting the Seattle Seahawks. Steelers are a -4.5 with a 45.5 over/under.
So they're giving 4.5 to the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is another example. I just want to state that of a West Coast team coming across the country playing a 1:00 game against the Steelers, who, again, are coming off that drubbing that the Patriots had of them. So I think sometimes that plays, but this is a pretty close game on a neutral field. So that's an interesting it's going to be an interesting game, because while the Seahawks are 1-0 and the Steelers are 0-1, they're both in a situation where I think they need a bounce back.
Yeah, because the Seahawks won at home just barely against a Bengals team that, yes, surprised us, but I still think they are what we thought they were. I think at the end of the season, Cincinnati's still going to be at the bottom of their division. So, they struggled against Cincinnati at home, and they're, in Seattle, the 12th man. That's supposed to be a very daunting task. What I see in this game is they went away from the majority of their offense being running last week. It was much more a balanced game, running and throwing the ball. Russ had 20 attempts, and it looks like there was 25 carries. So I anticipate it going more towards like a 70-30 in this game, especially on the road at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's going to need to bounce back, and I think they're going to bounce back in this one. I think Juju could have a good game. He had a lot of trouble last week. I think he's a little banged up, but from my understanding, he should be fine. I think that I think it could be another tough haul for Connor in this game because you do have a good defense in Seattle. I would expect them to try to get Jadeveon Clowney back there to cause trouble for Ben because, well, Ben's a tough guy to take down, but Clowney's an animal. So I think, they're going to try to get him there. But I do think that at the end of the day that Pittsburgh gets themselves back on track. I think that they try to push the run, even though it may not be super successful, but it'll do enough just to open up the passing game so that Juju can do his thing. I think you actually may see something out of Moncrief this week. I mean, keep in mind, he was targeted, I think, the most last week. He had like 10 targets, but dropped balls left and right. And I'm sure he got a talking to this week, over the week, about being a starting wide receiver in the NFL, and you're dropping every single ball that's in your hands against a team that, one, you're getting your ass kicked. Two, you don't need to look so bad against. They're a big rival, so I could see that it being a much closer game for just about the majority of the game, but 4.5 isn't a ton. I think the Steelers are going to win this game and cover by at least a touchdown and hit at least a touchdown lead. What do we say? 45.5 on the over/under. Yeah. I'm gonna go Pittsburgh covering and going over on the 45.5. I think. I think that Pittsburgh's going to come out and just be firing. Again, they may hit the ground game, and it may not work, but they're going to stay true to it just so they can open up the pass more for Roethlisberger.
Yeah, I'm on the Steelers covering. I think it's going to be close. I could see like a 6-point win in this. I'm going to go a little bit more. I'm going to go against what we saw in Week 1 because if you realize, Pittsburgh ran very poorly against New England. And so did Cincinnati, ran poorly against the Seahawks. So that would lead you to believe there's not going to be a whole lot of running. I think there's going to be more running in this game. I think they both had troublesome games, and they went away from some of the bread and butter.
Certainly for Seattle. I mean, they're
Seattle committed
NFL's
to it, but
team.
didn't have the type of explosion and production you'd expect. So I think we're going to hit the under on this. I just think the Steelers have to want it more again because Seattle did go 1-0. They are coming across, playing in probably a little bit warmer environment, though I think that's going to have very little to do with it. I see Pittsburgh rebounding. I don't think they were prepared for New England. I
felt like ready. They were just they were asleep at the wheel.
And so I think they can
the engine
back.
was running, but nobody's behind the wheel.
Yeah, I don't think Pittsburgh wants to have Roethlisberger threw for over 47 times I think in that game if I remember correctly. I think like 27 for 47, something in that realm.
I'll get you.
So
he was 27-47 for 276, no TDs and a pick.
That's not a line you want out of a Pittsburgh team. I think the defense for the Steelers has a little bit of a bounce back. I don't think they're as bad as everyone thinks. They may not be as good as the hype coming into the season. But I think they figure it out. Got a chance to kind of regroup and realize.
I'd like to see the kid they drafted, Devin Bush, have come into play because one of the things that Pittsburgh's known for is having good linebackers. In the past few years, it's been iffy there, and that's why they went ahead and took him in the first round because he is good, Devin Bush, and I think first game just trying to get acclimated. Keep in mind, the guy had 7 tackles last week and then 4 assists. So that's not too shabby. He as far as I can see, led the team in tackling. So I think with one game under his belt, probably a little more comfortable. Definitely not having to face someone like the Patriots here. Not that Russ and the Seahawks are anything to scoff at, but it's not Brady and the Patriots. I'd like to see Bush have a better day. Yep. Especially because the Seahawks are a running team, so that's bread and butter for a linebacker like him.
Yeah, again, this is a little bit of defining on the season. I would like to see him do it. I think it makes that division a lot more interesting with Pittsburgh having a rebound. Certainly with what the Ravens did, Cincinnati making a run, and then the Darlings falling on their face. It just could be real interesting. I think Steelers need to have this game, though. They just need to. They can't go down 0-2.
I agree.
And especially if they don't have a good performance. And, if it turns into a really poor performance, that would be alarm bells would be going off everywhere. I don't see it. I don't think they're that void of talent to do that.
Well, I mean, the one thing I will say is I'm a little concerned about their receiving core. I mean, Juju is great. And I think he can do fine taking over the number one duties, but they have got to find a 2 and a solid 2 and a decent 3 in there to take a little bit off of Juju. Sure. There was a lot of expectations for tight end Vance McDonald. I mean, he's a freak of nature, man. The guy's huge and he's very athletic. From a fantasy perspective, I punted in one of my leagues on tight ends early and was able to come back around and get him in double-digit rounds. I've dumped him already for the Hawkinson kid from Detroit. I was very disappointed, though. He had like 2 grabs, and they were at the end, and it meant nothing. But, and I'm fine with dumping him in fantasy for Hawkinson, but from a game perspective for the Steelers offense, he needs to get more involved, and Ben needs to get him more involved because I didn't see them running him out there on a lot of pass plays, and I didn't see Ben looking for him on a lot of pass plays. And if all the coverage is being shifted to Juju, I mean, the guy is a matchup problem at tight end, and they need to find a way to get him involved. So, but again, that's just kind of plays into the whole receiving thing with Pittsburgh. They need to find some more than one complementary piece between the other 2 receivers and the tight end for Juju.
Yep, agreed.
Last game of the early slate, Dave. We got the Minnesota Vikings traveling to Green Bay, yet another divisional matchup. Both teams 1-0, coming off victories last week. Vikings were at home against the Falcons. Packers were on the road against the Bears. We got an over-under of 44. The Pack is giving 3 to the Vikings. You're an AFC or an NFC North guy, so you're a Bears guy, so why don't you lead this one?
Well, I said after the Bears-Packers game, the thing I left, the game was, as we mentioned, was very sloppy. There wasn't a lot of offensive continuity in it. I didn't feel like I learned anything about the Bears or the Packers offensively. Certainly, it looked like at a couple of points, Aaron Rodgers kind of went back to doing Aaron Rodgers things, and it seemed like that's where they had the most success during the game offensively. Again, they were not able to run. There was a change in running back halfway through the game, roughly halfway through the game. They seemed to go more away from Aaron Jones and went to Jamal Williams.
Yes, we talked about that in our recap. I was a little perplexed there.
So, this one, the Packers are at home. The Vikings, on the other hand, look absolutely dominant, particularly on defense in the running game against the Falcons. I guess the Packers are probably going to have trouble scoring points again, only because Vikings are very similar, maybe not totally in style, but similar in the ability to shut down the run and play a tough defensive game. They are a strong defense, one of the better ones in the league. So the question becomes, when are we going to see the Packers offense at what it's going to be? I still don't know. I don't feel like I learned a lot in that game. And again, we're talking about a guy with a supremely gifted quarterback who can probably call his own plays and win a lot of games all by himself. So it's going to be hard to break it open. Now, the Packers, on the other hand, shut down the Bears' running game, but with a much more high-profile running back in Dalvin Cook in Minnesota. And on top of that, the emergence of Madison who played really well for the Vikings. If the Vikings can run on this Packers team, it could be tough. Like, I'm interested to see when the Packers are down, what happens with the offensive continuity then? I mean, they got to play with the lead for, a third of the, or 2/3 of the game. Wasn't a big lead, and it certainly wasn't in question the whole time. But, the Vikings, can they establish that and get out? Or, does this explosion that pretty much I think all of us are kind of waiting on? Like, I mean, when do we really ever expect the Packers not to score points? But the question then too is, how do we do it? How do we do it? Like, because is it going to have to be the Aaron Rodgers show because they get shut down on the ground again? So, the Bears had 5 sacks on this team last week, and not one of them went to Khalil Mack. Now, there's been a lot of analysis on his game, and, he made impact plays on like 33 of 37 defensive snaps. So it wasn't like he was non-existent. He just creates that much chaos that it opens up the other side. The opposite rusher for him had 3 sacks, and then you had 2 sacks on the interior defensive line. So does Minnesota do that? Minnesota's line looked very good. The Bears' offensive line was poor in that game, but generally thought of as a better offensive line, certainly in the top half of the league. So again, what do we see? I got to look at performance. I think that Cousins is going to have to be more involved in this game. I don't think they're getting away with 10 passes. So I guess by what I've seen, I'm going to go with the Vikings to win this game, but with the idea that I could see Rodgers' offense exploding at some point, and it's good. This is one of the tougher matchups, so I'll take the Vikings. So obviously I'm getting points there. I guess I'm gonna go with the over. I don't know. I don't know enough about this Packers team. I just don't to really feel comfortable going any which way. The Vikings, I think, are going to be what I think they are. I think they can score some points. If this game is close and it's a little more high scoring, you could see Kirk Cousins having a Kirk Cousins moment, and not a good one. I just don't know because I got to see the Packers put points on the board.
Yeah, I'm going to try to make this concise. I'm going to go Green Bay. I don't think they're going to cover, but I do think it's going to be over. It's a divisional game. I know it's only 3. You asked the question, when are we going to see that Packers offense, that Aaron? I think this is the week. Okay. I think that they had the early game on Thursday on the road. They were able to knock the dust off and come out of there with a win against a team that, it's your team. Like they were, I think, the team of that division, even though there's 3 out of the 4 teams, it could be anyone's division. I do think that Chicago was the team expected to be there at the end of the year for that division at the top. And the Packers went in there and took care of business. And that's a tough, tall task right at the beginning of the year, and they can put a check mark in that box, and I think they're going home. They're more comfortable. I do think that the defense for Green Bay might not be phenomenal, but I think they're much better. I think they are going – Dalvin Cook will probably see some carries. I don't think he'll have nearly as good of a day. I think it'll be the same thing for Green Bay. I don't think the running game will be that effective. I think the running game on both sides won't be. I think it's going to be an aerial attack, which is why I think it's going to go over. I think that Devontae Adams will get on point this week. I think you'll see some other guys get involved. Jimmy Graham, maybe not so much, because there is a good linebacking core there for Minnesota that I think he's lost, his talent of years ago, and I don't think it's going to be that hard for a guy like Anthony Barr to stay on him. I do think it'll be a close game, but to your point, I think it's going to have to be the quarterbacks. And, if you're comparing Aaron Rodgers to Kirk Cousins, well, there is no comparison. And I think that he will.
We could compare their contracts.
That's a discussion for a different day.
Yeah, I
mean, there's an absolute, apples and oranges with, paying a guy because he's worth it, and paying a guy because that's what the market sets. I don't know. I digress. Again, discussion for another day. But I think it will be the week that you see them start to go and early and make it hard for the Vikings and the Bears throughout the season. It's going to be a three-man race, and it's going to come to the end of the year, I think, for somebody to actually take that division. It could come. I mean, usually you have a divisional opponent at the end of the year, like right towards the end. It could come down to a game like that. Like the Packers and the Bears may meet again later in the year, and it could be that game that means the division.
Yep.
So, but I think you'll see it. I think Aaron Rodgers will do his thing. I think you saw him get a little more comfortable in LaFleur's offense, certainly right at the beginning of the second quarter. I think there'll be many more points than a 10-3 that we saw in the game last week with the Bears. But I think the Vikings, again, I think you'll see Diggs be heavily involved. I think Thielen will get some, but I think this would be one where Diggs might be a little more involved because I don't know how much time Cousins is going to have to allow a guy like Thielen to, get deep downfield and him have time in the pocket to throw a good ball. So, yeah, I think that this actually could be a really fun game to watch, probably one of the better ones of the 1 o'clock. I think that Green Bay will win it, but they're not going to cover the 3, and I do think it'll go over. So that will be exciting to see. So that wraps up the first portion of preview for Week 2 NFL, the Thursday night game and the early 1 o'clock Sunday games. And we will jump into the afternoon slate and the Sunday night, Monday night slate in the next cast. Thank y'all. Talk to you soon.
Life's the same. I'm moving in stereo. Life's the same, except for my shoes. Life's the same. You're shaking like tremolo. Life's the same. It's all inside.